Guys, what's up? Welcome back. I have a substrate experiment for you guys today. I been experimenting with some different additives to the hardwood fuel pellets, and specifically with different types of seed hulls. And as we talked about before, one important thing in growing mushrooms, especially if you want to be profitable or cost effective in doing it, is finding ingredients, substrate ingredients, agricultural waste streams that can get you materials that are inexpensive and readily available in your area and are also conducive to growing mushrooms on. So we know that seed hulls work well as an additive to hardwood sawdust. That's the original master's mix, right? 50% hardwood sawdust, 50% soy hulls. And we know that that works well. Soy hulls aren't readily available in my area. I can get them online, but they're kind of expensive. Same with cottonseed hulls. That's more of a southern thing. I'm up in New York. But we do have a lot of wheat in my area. I can get wheat bran fairly inexpensively. But the other thing I found is buckwheat hulls. So close to me, I have a buckwheat mill, and there's farms in the area that grow buckwheat, and they process the buckwheat into flour, pancake mix, that kind of thing. But the hulls of the buckwheat are a byproduct, and I can get these fairly inexpensively. I think they're 2 or 3 cubic foot bags. They come in for like $5, so that's pretty inexpensive. They're really light, fluffy seed hull, and they do hold a lot of moisture. And if you look at their nutritional profile, they look really conducive to growing mushrooms. They look really similar to soy hulls in their nutritional profile. So I'm going to see how they work. I'm going to see not only do they work well for growing mushrooms mixed in with my hardwood sawdust, but can I get away with my in-bag pasteurization method with adding a good amount of these buckwheat hulls to my hardwood sawdust, my hardwood fuel pellets. So this is a bag I made about a little over a week ago, and this is with a mixture of my hardwood fuel pellets and my buckwheat hulls. And this is a Italian oyster strain, Pleurotus pulmonaris, and you can see the bag is looking really good. I'm thinking pretty soon I'll be able to slit this open and get it in the fruiting chamber and get some mushrooms growing on it. I'm really excited to see how the oyster mushrooms pop on this substrate, but I want to get some extra bags rolling today. We're going to do 4 additional bags with this substrate, and we're going to do 2 different oyster strains and just kind of expand the experiment a little bit and see how it goes. So I'm going to take you down in the mushroom lab, and we'll mix our bags up. I'll show you exactly what ratios I'm using with the substrate, and we'll talk about how we're going to adjust the water levels just a little bit, try a couple different water ratios, and see which one we like best. So I'm weighing everything up like usual in my 2-quart cheap plastic juice container. And what I'm going to start out with is 1 pound, 12 ounces of dry hardwood fuel pellets. That's what you see on the bottom there. And then on top of that, I'm adding 8 ounces of buckwheat hulls. And what I found out is if you shake everything down, pack everything down in there, it just about fills that 2-quart juice container up. So I'll just take that whole container and I'll dump it into my 3T filter patch bag. I'm growing everything in these 3T filter patch bags. So this is what the buckwheat hulls look like. They're really light and fluffy, but they do hold quite a bit of water. So been playing with the moisture balance. When I did this bag, as I said, I did 1 pound, 12 ounces hardwood fuel pellets, 8 ounces buckwheat hulls, and I went with 3 pounds, 8 ounces of water. Now, the interesting thing is, with sawdust, the old rule was you keep mixing water in until, when you get a big handful of it, squeeze it as hard as you can. You want to just maybe get a couple drops of water when you squeeze a handful. By playing with this substrate, I know that if I was to pull this out of the bag and squeeze it, I would not get any drops of water out of it. I tried that. It just seemed too wet to me. So I'm actually going just short of that point. So just before you would start to get a couple drops of water. That's how I have this hydrated. I'm just kind of going by feel. Like I said, I've been doing this 20 years, so I can kind of get a feel of when the substrate's too wet and when it isn't. As I said, I went with 3 pounds, 8 ounces with this mix, and it seems about right. I would say maybe a hair wet, if anything. But it looks pretty good. I'm really interested to see how these mushrooms pop on this substrate. But in the meantime, we're gonna get 4 more blocks going. And I have 4 quarts of grain ready, 2 Italian oyster, Pleurotus pulmonaris, 2 Bratislavian blues, Pleurotus ostreatus. I have them labeled. I'm going to try 3 pounds, 8 ounces on 2 of them, and 3 pounds, 6 ounces of water on the other 2. And we'll just see what looks better. You know, mushrooms get a lot of their moisture in fruiting from the substrate, so you don't want to short them on moisture. But if you go too heavy on the moisture, that can lead to contamination and incomplete colonization and things that we definitely do not want. So we're going to play with the water a little bit, just, you know, a couple ounces one way or the other, which isn't huge when you're dealing with sawdust-based substrate because it holds definitely a lot of water. So when we finish up our finished block, I have everything kind of written out on my sticky note here. I couldn't survive without sticky notes, but we got 1 pound, 12 ounces hardwood fuel pellets, 8 ounces buckwheat hulls, half teaspoon of gypsum, and what that works out to, if we go with the 3 pounds, 8 ounces of water, that's a 5 pound, 12 ounce finished block. And by weight, we have 78% HWFP and 22% buckwheat hulls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure all the sub out for these 4 bags, and we'll get everything into the bags. I have water already going upstairs, and we're just going to do our standard in-bag boiling water pasteurization method. We have some really aggressive oyster strains lined up here, so I'm thinking they'll have no problem chewing through this substrate in plenty of time before we get any contamination. So I'm going to get these weighed up, and then we'll head upstairs to the kitchen and get our pasteurization rolling. Got our water boiling, and we're going to go ahead and do our in-bag pasteurization. I'm going to set the camera up, and you guys can watch me run these bags. I was looking for a container to prop my impulse sealer up on. Found this little guy here, but I opened it up, and there was probably like the moldiest bagel I've ever seen in my life in there. So anyway, I got rid of the bagel, washed the container out, but it was like nightmare stuff, guys. Like, you commercial growers would have just like screamed and run in fear out of the house and probably like never come back. So we might be pushing the envelope with our in-bag pasteurization here with our ambient spore load in the kitchen at present, but we're gonna try it out anyway. And that's kind of the cool thing with this in-bag pasteurization method, guys, is that it doesn't need to be sterile. Like, you can do this anywhere. I'm just working in my kitchen. I got my boiling water on my stove. This is nothing fancy here. It's definitely not a clean air environment, especially after that godforsaken bagel I just took out of that container. But usually we can get away with it. I mean, I rarely get any contamination using this method. So hopefully we won't this time either, even with the bagel of doom. But I'm going to set the camera up, and you guys can watch me run these bags. I used to measure all my water by volume. Now I've found I like doing it by weight a lot better. Seems to get more exact. You know, when I was doing it by volume, I would get some bags that were a little wetter, some bags a little drier. Since I started doing it by weight, it's, you know, obviously more accurate, so I'm not having those issues anymore. All right, that's it, guys. That's our last bag going into the tote. Man, that thing is hot. And we're just gonna wrap that tote in a blanket and let them go for 60 minutes. Our pasteurization is complete. We're set up in front of the flow hood here, and everything's been sprayed down with isopropyl. I'm gonna do this work in front of the flow hood because I have a flow hood, but with this pasteurization process, you can get away with it in just a clean room with pretty high success rates. Not quite as high as using the flow hood, so if you have one, by all means use it. But if not, you can go ahead and just do this in a clean room. I'm going to skip most of the flow hood work. I've shown this in a lot of my videos. It takes a little while to do, so I'm going to mostly skip it here. But if you want to see the full flow hood inoculation process with these bags, just check out any of my grow videos from 2022, like my lion's mane or oyster mushroom grow videos with pasteurized HWFP. You can see the whole process there. We have 4 jars all ready to go. They are angrily trying to climb out of the jar at this point, so these are definitely ready to go to some substrate. The 2 jars closest to me are Italian oyster, Pleurotus pulmonaris, and we have 2 Bratislavian blues in the back. So each one of these bags is going to get 1 jar of grain spawn. 1 quart jar is about a pound, maybe just a little over. So 1 jar to 1 bag. Real simple process. Just going to cut the top of the bags off below the impulse seal with the scissors. Put our grain spawn in and bring it over here to the impulse sealer. Seal it again. Once we get all our bags done, we'll give them a gentle squeeze and just listen for any air leaks. And as long as we don't have any leaks, we'll give them a really good shake, and then we'll move them over to the incubation shelves. You really want to make sure, it's pretty crucial to really shake these things up really well. You want to evenly distribute that grain spawn. So I'm going to go ahead and knock these guys up. Okay, we got our 4 bags all shook up and on the incubation shelves, and we'll just check back on them in a couple weeks. Hopefully by that time they'll be ready to fruit. And this was the one we did a little while ago. You can see that mycelium is just tearing through that sub. So this one's probably going to go in the fruiting chamber in a day or 2, and we'll check back in an update shortly. It's about a week and a half after inoculation, and you can see that mycelium is just ripping through that substrate. This one bag in front here, you can see there's a small area that's not colonized, and a couple days prior to this, it was actually a pretty large area. What happened was I just didn't do a great job shaking that bag and evenly distributing the grain spawn. So I had this big area with no spawn, but I figured it would be a good test to see how resilient the substrate mix would be against contamination. And I was hoping that that ostreatus mycelium would just rip in there and fully colonize that area before the contamination could take over. And the mycelium definitely won this one. Over the course of a few days, I watched it just fill in really rapidly. And then shortly after that, these brought blue blocks thickened up really heavily, and they just looked like they were ready to pin. So I went ahead and moved them into the refrigerator and did a 48-hour cold shock. And after that, I moved them to one of my clear plastic storage totes with the polyfill balls, and I let them pin in there. We are at about a week after the cold shock here, and our brought blue blocks are blowing up. You can see all those little pins. What I did, I just made a big X slit in the front of the block, and we have all these pins starting to bust out. This one back here is a little further along, even just tons of pins pushing that plastic back. So these are ready to go in the fruiting chamber. I just went ahead and pinned them in this plastic tub with the lid on. I just misted the inside walls of the tub and left them in here. Once I get to this point, they definitely need to go to the fruiting chamber here once you get pins going like this. So just fired up the fruiting chamber, got the visible mist going, and we'll get that up to around 86%, and we'll move these blocks in there. These things are going to rip. I mean, I would guess probably in 5-6 days we're going to be picking these. It's picking time for our first Bratislavian blue oyster block. Look at that first flush, guys. That is beautiful. Ton of mushrooms. This one's definitely ready to pick. I'm going to harvest everything and weigh it. We'll see what our yield is. The other brought blue is still in the fruiting chamber. Probably needs another day or so. It's getting close. The Italians are lagging a little bit behind, but I think it's the strain and the cool temperatures in my basement. I just picked up another Pulmonaris Italian strain, and I'm gonna try and work with that one from now on. I think it's gonna do better in my cooler temperatures. But these brat blues are just killing it on this buckwheat hull substrate, so let's pick them off and see what we got. Massive clusters here. Took a little substrate off, not too bad. That one's nice and heavy. Still a pretty big cluster over here. Beautiful. That cluster is just a little over 7 ounces. That one's 8.5. And with this little guy here, another 1.3 ounces. So we're just over a pound first flush. And that's not too bad. Pretty impressed with that. That's usually a little more than I get with my standard fuel pellet blocks, so I'm liking it. The other thing I like about these clusters is there's no aborts at all. Sometimes with these aggressive ostreatus strains, you'll see these yellowish brown pins in the back, underneath, on the sides here, these smaller ones that kind of get the energy diverted away from them. You'll see them like yellow brown up on you, and I don't see any of that in these clusters. They're all just really beautiful oyster mushroom clusters. So time for round 2 of our brat blue picorama. It's actually like 2 giant clusters that kind of fuse together, so see if we can extract them. That's a little substrate there, not too bad. That beautiful cluster there. Woo! Just over 14 ounces, 14.25. Same cluster here. Woo! 10 ounces. So we got 24 ounces. So we got over 1.5 pounds. Over 1.5 pounds of oysters first flush off of these blocks aren't even 6 pounds. It's a 5 pound, 12 ounce block. So this block, the one that had the better yields, had the 3 pounds 8 ounces of water. The other one had 3 pounds 6 ounces. So it's kind of interesting. Beautiful mushrooms, pretty good yields with my standard fuel pellet blocks, and I don't supplement. I'm usually between 3/4 pound and 1 pound first flush off of a 5+ pound block. So with this substrate mix, we're actually getting pretty nice yields. Just simple pasteurization, and I got over 1.5 pounds of mushrooms first flush. Give you guys some close-ups of these beautiful clusters here. We're gonna go ahead and call this a video. We're gonna wrap it up here. I'll probably keep these blocks around for a second flush, but we're gonna put them back in the tubs, probably wait for them to pin again, and we'll see how the second flush does. But the moral of the story is seed hulls make a great substrate additive, and there's lots of options. It doesn't have to be soy hulls. I've never seen anybody grow on buckwheat hulls before, and it turns out they work pretty good. I actually got really nice yields, and really pushing yields nicely with pasteurized substrates. So it's kind of the focus of my substrate research lately, so that's pretty exciting. So moral of the story, I guess, is see what's being cultivated in your local area and see what the byproducts are. There's lots of options, lots of crops out there. See if you can find some hulls or something in the waste stream that you can get locally inexpensively and just experiment with it in your substrate. So hit me up in comments, guys. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you next video.